It's Gators and Utes on Thursday night to officially kick off week one. Rice-Eccles, it's not very kind to visitors. 28-0 at home against non-conference opponents. That's dating back to 2007. Utah has not lost at home since a COVID-altered 2020. But get this, Florida, they took home the first installment of this series last year. That was in the Swamp. I am so excited for this matchup. So let's bring in some help breaking it all down. It's Jacob Rudner from Swamp 24/7 and Steve Bartle from Ute Zone. Guys, the biggest storyline of this game has got to be the status of Cam Rising as he recovers from that ACL injury he suffered in the Rose Bowl. So Steve, we'll start with you. What do we know about his availability for week one?
Yeah, on Monday, head coach Kyle Whittingham was asked if Cameron Rising and Brant Kuithe had been cleared, and Whittingham's response was no elaboration on the depth chart. So that's the official status of Cameron Rising, according to head coach Kyle Whittingham. But here's what we know or what we believe. Rising, has continued to practice in whatever form or fashion that may be and what he's allowed to do, and he's doing all that he can to be prepared to play. His approach hasn't changed, and he's preparing as if he's going to be the guy walking out of the tunnel and ready to start. However, the guys behind him are also in that same mode as preparing to be the starters. So if Rising can't go, Bryson Barnes is listed as the backup to Cameron Rising. He's filled in for him at times over the last two seasons. He's made plays each and every game he's played in. Nate Johnson is a former four-star quarterback in the 2022 cycle, a tremendous athlete that clocked a personal best 10.36 seconds in the 100 meters. So Utah will be looking to utilize that speed a little more, not only on Thursday night, but throughout the season. So regardless of who is starting. So it seems things are pointing towards Barnes getting the start against Florida, again, under the assumption that Rising has in fact not been cleared. And for Barnes, he's played against some tough defenses, and this will certainly be another tough test against the Florida Gators.
Definitely adding to the intrigue of this opener. If you go back to last year, this was really a statement win for Billy Napier to kick off his era as head coach. But Jacob, how much of an impact could this game, win or lose, have on the Gators' 2023 season?
I would say it's even more important than last year's iteration of this matchup. I think last year we saw, a version of a Florida team that kind of didn't have to prove itself as much as it does now. It was nice for Florida to be able to get a win in that game, catapults itself into the AP top 25 for the first time under Billy Napier. And that was, of course, important and gave Florida fans a lot of confidence in perhaps what Billy Napier might be building in Gainesville. But I just see this matchup as far more important. If Florida wins this, it gets its season off on the right foot. We know that there are two very challenging games in Florida's first four with Utah and Tennessee. If the Gators are able to secure a win in this one, their chances of being able to go 3-1 through the first four go up exponentially. Maybe even 4-0 through the first four games becomes possible with a win against Utah. So I would say that this is a tone-setting matchup and one that really could have a direct impact on Florida's win-loss column come the end of the season.
So we talked about the status of Cam Rising, but we really kind of have questions at quarterback for both of these squads. For Florida, we know it's going to be Graham Mertz, but we don't know what it's going to look like. So, Jacob, what do you anticipate that we learn about Mertz on Thursday night?
I think that we're going to see him just be the operator that Florida needs him to be. I don't think the expectation for this Florida team is that Graham Mertz goes out there and looks like some world-beating quarterback. I don't think that he is supposed to become some first-round pick. That being said, they will need him to do his job adequately, and that's to be sufficient in the short to medium game, to be able to hit on a couple of longer plays, especially in play action, taking advantage of Florida's star running backs, Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson, who create a lot of deception for that offense. But I think that the dynamic of how Florida operates will change slightly, such that Graham Mertz has as good a chance as possible to succeed. Last year, we saw Anthony Richardson do a lot of damage with his legs. Florida was able to kind of target that in its approach during most games. That won't be the case this year. Graham Mertz is not a scramble-first quarterback. His legs are not going to extend plays the way Richardson's were able to a year ago. And I think that kind of leads us to see a little more run replacement type stuff, screen passes, jet sweeps, things that are going to allow Florida to distribute the ball around the line of scrimmage to its playmakers and allow them to be the ones who are going to impress and pick up points. Whereas last year, that was a little more on Anthony Richardson. This year, I think it goes more towards that skill position, running back and wide receiver.
Yeah, it was really a coming out party for Anthony Richardson and what he was able to do on the ground. So, Steve, as Utah looks to prepare for a different type of quarterback and one that hasn't suited up for the Gators yet, what are those preparations like from the Ute side of things?
Yeah, for Utah, there's been a lot of film study, and there's been, in particular, a lot of film study of Graham Mertz at Wisconsin last season. And so, in talking to coaches and talking to players over the last few weeks, they've been very complimentary of Graham Mertz and what he brings to the table as a quarterback. Where he may not be the athlete or talent that Anthony Richardson is, he could be a better fit with this Billy Napier offense. So they are going to be prepared. They've done a lot of film study on Graham Mertz, as I said, at Wisconsin. And of course, they've been watching a lot of that game film from last season, the Utah-Florida matchup last season. Utah certainly did not have a performance on the defensive side of the ball up to their standards. There was a lot of missed tackles, a lot of poor play. And I think when we've talked to the players in fall camp, they've found a lot of motivation in watching, from watching that game last season. And this is a group that's, throughout fall camp, it's been a very physical camp. I don't think they want another repeat performance of last year where it seemed Florida was just able to run yard all over the Utah defense due to a lot of missed tackles and sloppy play. This defense wants to come in, they're focused, and they want to have a much better performance this year.
All right, we got the quarterback talk out of the way. Mertz is really just one of many new faces for both of these squads that we're going to see debut in week 1 on Thursday night. But I want to know who else we should have our eye on. Jacob, start us off.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a hard question with Florida. This is a team that's going to be heavily reliant upon newcomers. At least 20 guys, I think, are a factor in the 2 deep right now for that team. And we should see them in some capacity as soon as Thursday when they take the field against Utah. That being said, there are 2 guys on Florida's defensive line who stand out quite clearly to me, and that's Cam Jackson and Caleb Banks. 2 transfers, guys that Florida really loved in the portal over the offseason and made their moves quickly to be able to, secure their services. Cam Jackson out of Memphis, a big nose tackle type, somebody who's going to be able to throw his weight around on the line of scrimmage, really move the pocket, get after quarterbacks, and most importantly for this Florida defense, stop the run. It's something that did not occur regularly throughout last season. Florida's depth along its defensive lines proved extremely prohibitive in terms of its ability to stifle opposing teams on the ground. That shouldn't be the case this year with a guy like Cam Jackson in the fold. And then there's Caleb Banks, somebody who is a little bit more versatile, not necessarily as big of a body out of Louisville, was an end in high school, but has since kind of transitioned into more of an interior defensive lineman, 330 pounds, 6'5", 6'6", and just kind of gives Florida more of that size and depth. The ability to get after the quarterback quickly, to be able to stop opposing running backs is really important, especially after they struggled in that regard last year. And those guys should be able to help them tremendously.
Where Florida has a lot of new faces, Utah actually returns the majority of their roster. And so for new faces, it's few and far between on this Utah 2 deep. But there are 2 true freshmen that kind of stand out in this sense. And that's starting left tackle Spencer Fano and wide receiver Mikey Matthews. And I'll start there with Matthews. Utah has, a very talented kid in Matthews. He was a composite 4-star kid last year in last year's cycle. He's come into the program and has just impressed since day one, since he's joined the program. He's been very consistent in his level of play. He's developed a good chemistry with the quarterbacks. He's earned an OR designation, the only OR designation on the 2 deep, and he shares that with Micah Pittman, who has received a lot of praise for his impact as a transfer with this Utah offense. So to share that starting job with Micah Pittman, I think also says a lot about the true freshman Mikey Matthews. And then with Spencer Fano, he has earned the starting left tackle job as a true freshman, and that's a pretty rare feat in college football. Utah has a lot of good depth along the offensive line, so this isn't a move made out of necessity. They aren't hurting for offensive linemen. And, with Fano, this has been a goal of his since he committed to the program last December. And this has been something that he's worked towards, and everything that he's done has been with this goal in mind of not only playing this season, but earning a starting job out the gate. And so to see that on the 2 deep, to have him in that starting role, I think says a lot, not only about his ability but it says a lot about his maturity level and the trust that the coaches have in him to perform in that very important spot on the offensive line.
Yeah, Spencer Fano, one of the guys that our friend Blair Angulo, national recruiting analyst, absolutely loves from his region. So cool to see a true freshman get the start at left tackle. Okay, so finally, I want to know who are some under-the-radar players to watch. This is why we go to you guys, is because you have the boots-on-the-ground information. You know these rosters through and through. So, Steve, kick us off.
You know, I don't know how under the radar he is anymore, but Jaquindon Jackson is a very good candidate to be a breakout player this year. He made the move to running back from the quarterback position. He was a 4-star kid out of Duncanville High School in 2020. He made the switch mentally to running back in the final month of the season last year, and that's when he really kind of took off. He now has an offseason where he's been able to work on some of the nuanced things at the position, and there's a lot of optimism about his potential impact this season at Utah.
Yeah, and I'll stick on the offensive end, give you another skill position player. And for me, it's Khalil Jackson, a wide receiver for the Gators. Former walk, was not on scholarship for his first 3 seasons at the university, but this really emerged as somebody who Florida liked. Was not on scholarship still at that point. Placed on scholarship and emerged as somebody who was a really great, clean route and is now starting wide receiver for the Gators. His father is a Florida legend. This is somebody who I think really has the skill to be quite productive for this Gator team, and somebody who is now starting to stand out despite being a relative unknown part of his career.
All right. Hope you were taking notes. These guys know what they're talking about. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And if you want more exclusive information, check out Swamp 24/7 for all things Florida Gators and Ute Zone for all things Utah. Looking forward to this one.